The conductor leaned down beside my window seat, pretending to check my ticket, and her lips barely moved. Get off this train at the next station. Tell them you're having a heart attack. Do it now, or you won't make it to Sacramento. My hands went cold on the armrest. 4 rows back, my nephew Derek and his fiancée Vanessa sat scrolling their phones. The 2 people who had bought my ticket packed my bag and hugged me tight at the station an hour ago. I had 11 minutes before the next stop. 11 minutes to decide whether to trust a stranger in a blue uniform or the family I'd raised like my own children. My name is Walter Pruitt. I'm 68 years old, and I spent 35 years as a claims investigator for an insurance company in Fresno, California. 35 years of learning one hard truth. People lie with their mouths, but their bank accounts always tell the truth eventually. I never imagined I'd need that skill on my own family. I'd been sitting in my den 3 weeks earlier, going through old case files I kept out of habit, when I heard Derek's truck pull into my driveway. My nephew and his fiancée had been staying with me for almost a year, ever since Derek lost his job at the plant. Rent-free, mostly silent, the kind of arrangement where you pass each other in the hallway and say morning like strangers sharing an elevator. So when I heard both of them coming up the porch steps together, moving slow and deliberate, something in my chest tightened before my brain caught up. Vanessa knocked even though the door was open. "Uncle Walter," she said, her voice syrupy in a way it never usually was, "we need to talk to you about something." I set down the folder I was holding. 35 years of interviewing claimants taught me that a slow, careful pause buys you time to read a room. Derek stood behind her, hands jammed in his pockets, looking at everything except my face. "Family," he finally said. "We've been thinking we need more family time, before things get busier." "Busier how?" I asked. Vanessa waved her hand, like she was swatting away the question. "Derek, tell him about the train trip." My nephew's smile arrived a half-second too late to look real. "Uncle Walt, remember when you took me to the Grand Canyon when I was 12? I want to do something like that again. A train trip up to Sacramento, see the old capital, maybe up into wine country after, our treat. Already booked." I remembered that Grand Canyon trip clearly. He'd complained the whole ride, refused to eat the food, cried because he missed his video games. I didn't say any of that. I just asked, "Why now?" "Because we love you," Vanessa said, too fast, the words landing before I'd even finished my sentence. That evening she cooked dinner, which she never did. She moved through my kitchen with a strange, proprietary confidence, like she was already deciding where the furniture would go after I was gone. Derek poured me a glass of wine with a hand that wasn't quite steady. Between bites, Vanessa set her fork down and said, almost casually, "Uncle Walter, your policy through the company, it's still active, isn't it? 420,000. That's a lot of security." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "How do you know that number?" "Derek mentioned it," she said, slicing her chicken into small, identical pieces. "Just conversation." I looked at my nephew. He was studying the tablecloth like it held the answer to something. And a cold, quiet voice in the back of my head, the same voice that used to catch fraudulent claims from across a desk, said, "That detail doesn't belong in this conversation." So I ran a small test, the way I'd run 1,000 of them on strangers who thought they were smarter than the file in front of me. "I've been getting these headaches lately," I said. "Dizzy spells. Probably nothing." And I watched. For one unguarded second, something flickered behind Derek's eyes. Not worry. Something closer to relief. Then he caught himself. "You should see someone about that," he said. And Vanessa cut in smooth as glass. "He's fine, Derek, don't fuss. It's probably just the heat." Their eyes met across the table for half a second. Just half. But 35 years of watching liars taught me exactly what a shared secret looks like passing between 2 people. After they went to bed, I found the train tickets on the kitchen counter, already purchased, my seat already paid for, dated for the following week. They'd been certain of my answer before they'd even asked the question. I sat up that night with an old photograph of Derek at 9 years old, missing his front teeth, grinning up at me from a fishing trip on Shaver Lake. I let myself feel the weight of it all the way down, and then I put the photo in a drawer, because 35 years of claims work had taught me one rule that never failed: money leaves a trail. Always. By morning, I had made a decision in the dark. I would go on the trip. I would watch. I would document everything, the way I'd been trained to. When Derek knocked on my door the next morning with a smile too bright for 7 a.m. and asked, "So, are you in, Uncle Walt?" I said yes. I watched relief wash over his face, followed by something else. Not affection, anticipation. I packed carefully that morning, and when I got to my pill organizer, I paused, hearing Vanessa's voice in my head. He's fine, Derek. My hands moved on their own, and I put every bottle into my carry-on instead of my checked bag. A small precaution that looks paranoid right up until it isn't. The drive to the station told its own story to anyone keeping notes. Derek said the trunk was full, so my suitcase rode on my lap, but I'd glanced inside that trunk while he wasn't looking, and it was nearly empty. He gripped the wheel until his knuckles went pale. Vanessa typed messages on her phone and deleted the threads the second she'd sent them, her face wearing a flat, calculating stillness I'd started to recognize as her real one. Excited, Uncle Walter? Derek asked, and his voice cracked on the last word. Should I be? I said. He didn't catch it at all. We passed the diner where I used to take him after Little League, the community pool where I'd taught him to swim, and with every mile, the pressure in my chest built. Not my heart. Information. At the station, they walked ahead of me through the ticket gate, Vanessa's hand firm on my shoulder as she steered me through, watching the security scanner a little too closely as my carry-on passed through it. See, easy, she said, and her relief was 3 sizes too big for the moment. They boarded first, found seats near the front, and didn't look back once. I found my row further back, wedged my suitcase overhead, and sat among strangers, my hands cold in my lap. If you've ever realized that the people who are supposed to be yours have stopped looking back for you, you know that feeling isn't loneliness, it's information. The train pulled out of the station, and that's when the conductor came down the aisle, checking tickets, calling out stops in a bored, practiced voice, until she reached my row. Her name tag said Marisol. She leaned down, professional smile fixed in place, pretending to check my ticket stub, and her voice dropped to almost nothing. Get off at the next station. Tell them you're having a heart attack. Do it now, or you won't make it to Sacramento. Then she straightened up and moved on down the aisle like nothing had happened, checking the next passenger's ticket, laughing at something someone said. I sat frozen, staring at the seat back in front of me. Up near the front of the car, Derek and Vanessa were bent over Vanessa's phone, laughing at something on the screen. Was this a joke? A mistake? Some kind of drill? I stood up on shaking legs and took one step toward the front of the car, and that's when Marisol reappeared beside me, and this time the professional mask had cracked straight down the middle. Her fingers closed around my wrist, and they were trembling. Sir, she whispered, please, I am begging you, get off at the next stop. I looked into her eyes, and I want to tell you exactly what I saw there, because it decided everything that came after. Not confusion, not concern, fear. The specific kind of fear that belongs to someone who knows something and is running out of time to act on it. Are you certain? I asked quietly. I have never been more certain of anything, she said. And from up the aisle I heard Derek's voice, sharper than it should have been. Uncle Walt, you good back there? I made my decision the way you learned to pull your hand back from a hot stove, no thinking involved, pure reflex. I pressed my hand to my chest, let my knees buckle, and went down into the aisle. My chest, I said. I can't breathe. The fear in my voice was completely real. Only the cause of it was invented. The train car erupted. Sir, can you hear me? Stay with us, someone shouting for the conductor, hands under my arms lowering me flat. And through all of it, I kept my eyes open and working, because here is the moment I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I looked up the aisle at my nephew and his fiancée, and in the half second before they arranged their faces into something resembling worry, I saw it clearly. Disappointment. Plain, unmistakable disappointment. The look of two people watching an experiment failed to produce the result they were counting on. Derek stood halfway out of his seat, his expression sliding into concern a beat too late. Uncle Walt, what's wrong? Should we come back there? And a train employee blocked the aisle. Stay seated, sir. Medical is being called ahead to the next station. As they carried me off the train on a stretcher at the next stop, I heard Vanessa's voice, low, meant only for Derek, but carrying in the stunned quiet of the car. This ruins everything. And Derek hissed back, not here, not now. They parked me in a small first aid room at the station while a paramedic checked my vitals and pronounced them excellent. Probably anxiety, sir. Happens more than you'd think. Through the window, I watched the train pull away without me, carrying my nephew toward a wine country weekend whose entire purpose had just walked off 2 stops early. My phone buzzed. Derek. Uncle Walt, hope you. Okay, we'll call when we check in. then again, then a third time. I turned the phone off. The door opened, and Marisol slipped inside. Off duty now, out of uniform, her face pale. She checked the hallway twice before closing the door behind her. "What I'm about to show you could end my career," she said. "But I couldn't live with myself if I didn't." She pulled out her phone with unsteady fingers and opened a voice memo. "I recorded this in the crew restroom before we left the station," she said. "It's your nephew's fiancée." The audio was tinny, echoing off tile, but the words came through with terrible clarity. Vanessa's voice, calm, businesslike. "The pills dissolve completely in his coffee within a few minutes. He won't taste a thing." A pause, someone answering on the other end. "Cardiac symptoms at this altitude read as completely natural. By the time anyone competent looks closely, we're 3 states away." Then, lighter, almost amused. 420,000. Derek's nervous, but he's committed. And then Vanessa laughed. She actually laughed. I played that recording 4 times, and each time I heard something new. The dosage math, the timeline, the profit margin calculated against my own pulse. "Who was she talking to?" I asked. "I don't know," Marisol said. "But she said the plan was already moving and that your nephew was fully on board with it." Those were her exact words. On board. I looked at this stranger who had just thrown away her career to keep me alive, and I asked her the only question that mattered. "Why would you risk everything for a man you've never met?" Something old moved across her face. "My uncle," she said. 2 years ago, my cousin convinced him to change his beneficiary. He died 3 weeks later, and the coroner called it natural causes, and I always knew, but I never had proof, and I never said a word. I have been silent exactly once in my life, Mr. Pruitt. Never again. I wrote her number into the small notebook I've carried in my jacket pocket since 1987, an old investigator's habit. Print clearly. Date everything. We shook hands, and hers had finally stopped shaking. "Stop them," she said. That was her entire goodbye. The bus ride home took almost 3 hours, and the driver asked if I'd missed my connection. "No," I told the window. I caught something instead. My house looked exactly the same from the curb, the same tired oak tree, the same crack in the driveway I kept meaning to fix. But when I unlocked the front door, the whole place felt different, contaminated, like every room now carried a second history underneath the first one. This had all been planned at my kitchen table, rehearsed in the guest room down the hall. I went straight to my study, pulled out every file I owned, insurance, banking, deeds, legal paperwork, and spread 35 years of professional habit across my own dining room table. Investigation applied to my own survival. Hours passed. I found it around midnight. A beneficiary change form on my policy, dated 4 months earlier, moving everything from my daughter Claire, who lived 2 states away and called me every Sunday without fail, over to Derek Pruitt. The signature at the bottom was a decent forgery of mine, except for the capital P, which had a flourish I have never once made in 68 years of signing my name. I photographed it, then I kept digging, and the floor kept dropping out from under me. Bank statements showing transfers I never authorized, $31,000 siphoned out over 8 months in amounts small enough to slip past. A power of attorney granting Derek financial control, my signature forged across the bottom. And in the last folder, medical records from appointments I had never attended, documenting a memory decline I had never experienced. Confusion, disorientation, progressive impairment. All fabricated, all formatted to look completely official. They hadn't just planned to kill me. They'd spent months erasing me first, building a paper version of a man whose mind was already gone, so my death would read as a sad inevitability, and my objections, if I somehow lived long enough to raise any, would mean nothing. I stood alone in my dining room and said it out loud, because saying it made it real. They planned this for months, living under my roof, eating at my table, and I felt the shock burn off into something colder and more useful. They didn't know about the recording. They didn't know I'd found the paperwork. They had no idea the man they'd been studying had started studying them right back. 3 days later, I sat across from Renee Alvarez, an elder law attorney with 22 years of experience and a handshake like a closing argument. She went quiet, folder by folder. Forged beneficiary form, fraudulent power of attorney, fabricated medical decline. When she reached the last folder, she looked up. "Your nephew's fiancé works in healthcare administration?" "Billing coordinator," I said. 14 years. She knows the systems. Renee exhaled slowly. "She manufactured your incompetence on paper. while you were still sharp enough to catch it. Then I did something I'm not entirely proud of. I handed her Derek's laptop, which he'd left charging in the guest room. The passwords still the ones I'd set up for him years ago that he'd never bothered to change. Deleted emails came back to life under recovery software. A correspondence with someone calling himself a private consultant. Discussion of a compound, hard to detect on standard toxicology, particularly effective at altitude. A price, $8,000 for consultation and supply. A meeting arranged in a parking garage downtown. Renee read in silence, then said flatly, "Walter, your nephew priced your death like a used car." The words should have broken something in me. They didn't. I'd already burned through that particular grief over 3 sleepless nights and come out the other side, colder. "Keep scrolling," I said. "There's a will." There was a draft on his desktop, leaving everything to Derek and Vanessa, my signature forged at the bottom, dated for a future they were confident I wouldn't live to see. Renee took off her glasses and asked me the question that shaped everything that followed. "When this is over, do you want justice or do you want revenge?" I didn't hesitate because I'd already answered that question for myself in the dark. "I want them to fully understand what they did," I said, "and I want consequences that outlast their apology." She nodded slowly. "Then we build the case airtight first, and we let them keep digging their own hole. 1 week," she said. "Freezes, protective filings, all with delayed notice. Act completely normal. And Walter," she paused at the door, "they're going to panic when the locks engage." "Good," I said. "Panicked people make mistakes." What followed was the strangest performance of my life, and I gave it everything I had. For 2 weeks, I played the man their forged records described. I let my coffee go cold, staring at nothing. I asked which pills were mine while a hidden camera above the refrigerator recorded Vanessa's satisfied little smile as she handed them over. "Thank you, sweetheart. I don't know what I'd do without you two." I had 12 legitimate security cameras installed, full audio, at my own request, and here's the detail I still savor. Derek and Vanessa approved of it enthusiastically. "For your safety, Uncle Walt." Smart thinking. Neither of them ever asked to see the specifications. Neither of them realized every whispered argument in my living room was streaming to a cloud account only I could access. I added one touch of my own, a small recorder tucked behind the vent above the kitchen table, the same kind of trick I'd used decades earlier to catch a claims adjuster taking bribes. It paid off within 48 hours. Late that night, through my headphones, I heard Vanessa's voice, tight with anger. "The train was supposed to end this. Now we're back to 0. And you told me the dosage would be undetectable." And Derek, quiet, defeated, and Vanessa, dropping into that flat, clinical register that scared me more than any shouting could. Then we moved to the incompetency plan. Look at him lately, he's already halfway there. I lay in the dark, 1 floor above them, expressionless, recording every word. And I thought, not with rage, with something quieter. You're not watching me decline, you're watching me aim. The riskiest work happened deeper into the night, cloning files off Derek's laptop while he slept, an external drive slowly filling with evidence. One close call, at 80% copied, when footsteps creaked in the hallway, and I slipped out through the connecting bathroom with the drive in my pocket and my heart pounding against 35 years of practiced calm. Meanwhile, in daylight, I built the legal fortress. A new will, legitimate and bulletproof, executed in front of a notary named Grace Kim, who read every clause aloud, recorded my declaration on video, took my fingerprints, and asked me directly, "Your nephew inherits nothing?" "He negotiated a price for my death," I told her. "He'll receive exactly what he paid for. Everything goes to the Riverbend Veterans Literacy Fund." She added 2 extra witnesses without me asking and said quietly, "I've seen this before. Families who look at an old man and see an empty seat instead of a person." Renee handed me a burner phone in a parking garage. If they escalate physically, 1 button, police already briefed. I pocketed it, hoping I'd never need it. The account freeze engaged on a Tuesday morning. I sat behind a newspaper I wasn't reading, counting the minutes, while upstairs Derek's computer chimed and his voice went sharp. "Vanessa, get up here." Error messages multiplied across his screen all morning. Access denied. Account locked. Appear in person to resolve. I filmed it from the hallway, unnoticed. His call to the bank went from confident to pleading, and when he hung up, his face had gone the color of ash. "All third-party access suspended, pending investigation," he told Vanessa. That evening I made a pot roast, low and slow, the way I'd learned after my wife passed, and I served it to my would-be killers with perfectly steady hands. Somewhere between the potatoes and the silence, I said, conversationally, "Funny thing today, the bank called about some unusual activity on my accounts. Unauthorized transfers, apparently. I asked them to investigate thoroughly." Derek choked on his water. Vanessa's fork paused midair, one tremor, quickly mastered, and then she pushed back with the only tool she had left. "Uncle Walter, this is exactly why you need oversight. You're clearly getting confused." "Oversight," I repeated, tasting the word. "From whom, exactly? Protection from what?" The silence answered for both of them. Later, drying dishes, Derek hovered near me. "Maybe I should come to the bank with you, Uncle Walt, help you explain things." I smiled gently. "That's kind, but I can manage my own finances. I'm not incompetent." Yet, the word hung there like a dropped plate. I watched him search my face, trying to calculate how much I knew, and I let him keep wondering. That night, the living room camera caught their war council in perfect audio. Vanessa pacing. "We need medical power of attorney. I know people who can get him declared unfit. We become his guardians, and guardians control everything, including whether this investigation goes anywhere." And Derek, my fishing trip boy, nodding along, doing the arithmetic in his head. I opened my old case notebook that night and wrote one line. "Sometimes the only way to teach the final lesson is to let people fail the test they wrote for themselves." Then I slept better than I had in weeks. The fake doctor called 2 mornings later, a pleasant voice claiming to represent my primary care physician, inviting me in for a routine cognitive evaluation that afternoon. Fascinating, since I've had the same doctor for 11 years and he's never once called me himself. Of course, I said warmly, "I appreciate the thorough care." Then I called Renee, who checked the license number in 90 seconds. No such credential registered in the state. I kept the appointment anyway, recorder in my shirt pocket, and found exactly what I expected: a rented suite with a printed sign taped to the door, and a stranger with borrowed credentials, asking questions designed to make any answer sound impaired. I performed mild confusion, recorded every word, then drove straight to the genuine article, a forensic psychiatrist named Dr. Priya Nair, who ran me through 2 hours of memory drills and pattern tests, watching my method as much as my answers, and finally set down her pen. "Mr. Pruitt, your cognitive function is well above average for any age. No decline, no confusion, no paranoia." I drove home with her preliminary report on the passenger seat and found Derek's car blocking my driveway. He stood on the porch, holding a manila envelope, wearing the look of a man who's decided to bluff his way through a test he already failed. "Uncle Walt, this is for your own good," he said, hand shaking as he held it out. "You're not well." I read every page standing right there in my driveway. A petition for guardianship, paranoid delusions regarding family, progressive memory loss, financial incompetence, a danger to himself, sworn witness statements attached, and a psychiatric evaluation from a Dr. Sandra Kowalski, a physician I have never once met in my life. I looked up at him and asked one quiet question. "Whose protection is this really for, Derek? Mine or yours?" He didn't answer. He got in his car and left. That evening, I went door to door around the neighborhood with my old notebook, and the witness statements started falling apart one at a time. My neighbor, Mrs. Ruiz, cried on her own porch. "He told me it was paperwork to help take care of you. That's all I signed. I saw you gardening at 11 at night. That's all I said. Checking my new cameras in my pajamas," I told her gently. She promised to recant. 2 more did the same. 3 others wouldn't answer their doors at all. And I learned later, Derek had paid them, 300 here, 500 there, testimony purchased at a struggling neighbor's price. At the preliminary hearing, the judge read both filings with open skepticism and ordered an independent court-appointed evaluation with Dr. Nair. Renee wanted to file everything immediately after that: attempted murder, forgery, all of it, end it now. I shook my head. Not yet. If we move now, they lawyer up and stop generating evidence. Let them keep writing their own confession, one mistake at a time. Dr. Nair's court-ordered report landed like a verdict ahead of the verdict: full capacity, no impairment, petition recommended for denial. That same afternoon in Renee's office, we assembled the whole case. A 60-page counterfiling detailing 17 separate criminal acts, boxes of exhibits, color-coded and chronological. "We file everything," Renee said. "Everything," I agreed. I watched from a bench as the paperwork moved through the courthouse, and emergency hearings appeared on the calendar within hours. That afternoon, a process server rang my own doorbell while I filmed quietly from across the street. Vanessa answered, took the envelope, and her face ran through its last honest sequence: shock, recognition, fear, before she screamed for Derek. Their argument played out in silhouette against my living room curtains, and the server's report, later entered as evidence, preserved her exact words. "You told me he was too old to ever put it together. You promised me." That night my cameras recorded the frenzy: Derek deleting files, dragging folders to the trash, attempting a full drive wipe with the fumbling panic of a man who learned computers from his uncle. Vanessa feeding paper into the shredder until it jammed, then tearing pages by hand. Renee called, watching the same live feed. "Every deletion is a fresh charge," she said. "Obstruction. They're manufacturing their own exhibits now." The first settlement offer arrived within 36 hours. Return the $31,000, vacate the house immediately, waive all inheritance, accept a restraining order, and every criminal charge disappears. I read it at the same table where all of this had started. "They researched what stops a heart," I told Renee. "They priced it, they boarded the train. This isn't a billing dispute. Schedule the trial." A second offer came weeks later, $90,000. Hand-delivered by Vanessa's mortified sister, the word "mistakes" sitting right there in the first sentence. I uncapped a pen and wrote one line across the top, in the same handwriting I'd used on 35 years of claim files. "Justice is not for sale. See you in court." Marisol called that same evening, and when I asked if she'd be willing to testify publicly, she answered without a breath of hesitation. "My uncle never got his day," she said. "Yours is going to count for both of them." Their world came apart with the slow thoroughness of erosion after that. Derek's gambling debts surfaced through the filings. Over $60,000 across sports books and online betting apps, and collectors, learning he'd inherit nothing, escalated from phone calls to showing up at his job site. Vanessa's employer opened its own internal investigation, found her fingerprints across unauthorized record access, and ended 14 years of employment in a 15-minute meeting with a security escort and a confiscated badge. Their new apartment had thin walls, and the neighbors heard everything. "This is your fault, your debts, your weakness. You wanted him dead. I wanted the money." The trial itself is the part I'll slow down for, because it's the part that mattered most. The courtroom filled early, a few reporters in the back rows once word got out that a passenger had walked off a moving train 2 stops before a planned poisoning. Derek and Vanessa sat beside their attorney, already looking diminished, like exhibits of themselves. The prosecutor's opening was surgical. The defendants planned the murder of Walter Pruitt for insurance proceeds, researched the method, purchased the substance, forged the paperwork, and boarded the train with him. The only reason the victim is sitting in this courtroom instead of appearing in a coroner's report is one conductor with a conscience and a working phone. Then the recording played through the courtroom speakers, and I watched 12 jurors listen to Vanessa's calm voice price my heartbeat at $420,000 and laugh. Derek flinched at the laugh. Vanessa stared at a fixed point on the wall and didn't move for the full 90 seconds. Marisol took the stand, and her voice shook for exactly the first few questions before it steadied and never wavered again. "I heard someone plan a man's death like a grocery list," she said. "I recorded it because 2 years ago I stayed silent, and I buried my uncle wondering." The defense tried to attack her finances on cross. "Isn't it true you have debts of your own?" She leaned toward the microphone. "My situation is exactly why I recognize desperation, and I still didn't let it turn me into an accomplice." A document examiner walked the jury through the forged capital P under magnification. The bank walked them through $31,000 stolen in careful increments. Dr. Nair testified to a mind with no decline whatsoever, dismantling the incompetency claim in under 12 minutes. Recovered emails scrolled across the courtroom screen, the toxicology discussion, the altitude notes, $8,000, while Derek studied his own hands. Then I took the stand. "When did you first suspect something was wrong?" the prosecutor asked. "When the invitation arrived," I said. 8 months of near silence, then a free vacation with a deadline attached. In my old line of work, we called that an anomalous claim. Anomalous claims get investigated. And what did you do about it? Exactly what I did for 35 years. Documented everything, trusted the paper trail, verified before I ever accused anyone. I just never expected the file would be my own family. The jury returned in under 2 hours. Guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty of fraud, guilty of forgery, guilty, guilty, guilty. Each word landing on Derek like a physical weight until his head dropped into his hands. Unlike the version of this story you may have heard before, the judge in my case did not go easy. Derek was sentenced to 11 years in state prison, full restitution, and a permanent felony record. Vanessa received 14 years. Her professional license permanently revoked, every asset connected to the fraud seized. The judge's closing line has stayed with me since. This was not a moment of weakness. This was a business plan built on a man's death, and the law will treat it as exactly that. Outside on the courthouse steps, I gave the two reporters waiting there 11 words about trust and consequences, and declined to say anything else. In the parking structure, I caught one last glimpse of Derek's father, my own brother, standing off to the side, unable to meet my eyes. We didn't speak. There was nothing left that needed saying out loud. Here's what this whole ordeal taught me, and I want to pass it on to you plainly, because that's the entire reason I'm telling it tonight. The mistake most of us make is believing that being loved and being seen are the same thing. They are not. Vanessa counted on that confusion completely. She knew that an old man will explain away almost any strange behavior to protect the picture he's built of the people he raised. That kind of denial is the most dependable accomplice there is. What kept me alive wasn't luck. It was one stranger who refused to stay quiet, and 35 years of a habit that anyone listening tonight can start right now. So start it. This week, call your insurance company and have them read your current beneficiaries back to you out loud. Then ask them to flag the account, so any future change requires your direct verbal confirmation, 10 minutes of your time. Most people haven't checked in over a decade, and the people counting on that gap are usually closer to you than you'd like to believe. Then sit with the harder question, the one I still turn over some nights in my study. Of the people closest to you, who knows more about what your death is worth than they know about how your actual day went? Take your time with that one. I certainly did. And now, I'd like to hear from you. Put a 1 in the comments if you think I was right to go home and quietly build the case in silence for 2 weeks, letting them keep incriminating themselves. Put a 2 if you think I should have taken Marisol's recording straight to the police that same afternoon before another minute passed. Put a 3 if you believe I owed Derek one honest conversation, uncle to nephew, before any of this ever reached a courtroom. Tell me where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is where you are. It always moves me to hear how far these stories travel. And if a stranger has ever stepped in to protect you when your own family wouldn't, or if you've ever caught that one wrong flicker cross a familiar face, I'd like to hear about that too. Somebody watching this tonight is sitting at a dinner table where the numbers quietly don't add up, and they need to hear that they're not imagining it. They're paying attention, and that's enough reason to keep paying attention. If this one meant something to you, stay a while longer. I've got a lifetime of these, and this corner of the internet only exists because people like you keep coming back to it. Thank you for sitting with me tonight. I'll see you in the next one.